Okay, welcome back, everybody, to another Project Inspire edition of Ask the Rabbi. Once again, we have our panel here. Rabbi Orlovsky is joining us from Israel. So is Rav Gav, who actually does not have a background to him, so we can actually see him. And Rabbi Yitzchak Feldheim from Lakewood, New Jersey, joining us.
He has the most background.
That's right, yeah. Okay, so we are here today. As you know, we had a session before, which was a basic Judaism and God discussion. There was feedback. If you don't mind me going back to the last session, just to reiterate a question that was posed last time, and people sent us feedback. And by the way, all of you who are watching this, please send us your feedback. We appreciate the feedback that was sent, and we're going to address part of it right now. We asked a question last time that Jews have this feeling that their Torah, our God is true, exists, God exists. Do we have a right to walk around sort of like we're right, they're wrong? That was the question that was posed. You might remember from last session where Gabo was discussing his airplane, his airline flights. I think that it was Rabbi Orlovsky who said, "You have really interesting flights." By me, nobody asked me these questions, something like that. But I'm just going to repost it because people emailed in saying that we didn't really answer the question. It was more of addressing the one who was asking it and what he's feeling at the time that he's asking such a question. So I want to put this out. I'll start with you, Rabbi Orlovsky, if you don't mind. Do we have a right to believe, to think we know, etc., that God exists and the Torah is true?
Well, let's put it this way. If somebody could show me that I'm wrong, there is no God and there is no Torah, that's it. I'm done. I'm finished. I'm not doing this because it feels good. I'm not doing this as an emotional crutch. Either it's true or it's not true. Either there's a God and he gave the Torah, or there's not. And this is a book of fairy tales. And if it's a book of fairy tales, I got to tell you, I'm a little too old for the Easter Bunny. You know, I remember when I was growing up, I grew up in a conservative synagogue, and the head of the education committee wrote an article in the journal, the synagogue journal, before Purim, explaining how Purim never actually happened, and it's a Zoroastrian fairy tale, and on and on and on, the whole thing. So my father showed it to me. I said, okay. He copied the whole thing out of Grazel. I read it in the original. You know, it's I could respond to all this, but I have a simpler question. How does he look at his kid with a straight face and say, go to synagogue and Purim? He says, Dad, I'm too old for a Zoroastrian fairy tale. You know, I grew out of this. I don't leave out cookies for Santa anymore. You know, it's ridiculous. So if this is not true, I wouldn't do it. Now, you hear these stories about people who go someplace for Shabbos and they have a beautiful meal and they meet the family and they have a cholent and they're so inspired they become religious. Yeah, that didn't work for me. I was a cynic from the time I was born, and I always fashioned myself something of an intellectual, and I was very good at arguing from the time that I was little. And I came from a family that was not Shomer Shabbos, and I was not particularly interested in it. And so when the people who approached me, what won me over was not the fact that this is a better way to live, but that it's true, that they provided evidence for the existence of God and that he gave the Torah and that it's correct to this day, those three things. So that when I became observant, it was kicking and screaming. I didn't want to. But I was faced with the truth. And I remember I had a Rebbe, Rabbi Yaakov Weil, and Zatzal, and he was arguing with us. And I said to my friends, I said, we have to argue with this guy. They said, ignore him, he's a fanatic. I said, but what if he's right? They said, ignore him anyway. And I couldn't do that because if it was true, then I had to follow it through. And if it's not true, I would give this up in a second. I don't need more ritual in my life. I don't need any fairy tales. Either there's a God or there's not a God. Either he gave the Torah or he didn't. And that's it. The only thing the only question to my mind is whether it's real or not. Everybody has a claim. Everybody can say that I know that there's a God. I believe I'm right. So what if you believe you're right? Everybody thinks they're right. But, as Rav Noach Weinberg from Eshet Torah put it once, he says, if I believe in the world to come and you don't, so they don't close the place down for you and open it up for me. Either it's real or it's not real. Either it's true or it's not true. Either Jesus is the Son of God or he's not. But that's it. There's only two possibilities.
Right. Gav, just addressing the point of is there a God specifically? I mean, the last time you spoke about the people who would ask you this question on the plane. How would you answer somebody who turned to you and said, like, come on?
Right. Okay. It's a great question. And it's funny because I come a little bit from the opposite spectrum from Orlovsky in terms of I grew up in a religious home. So even if you showed me it's not true, I'm still going to do it because I have that emotional, beginning point. But I believe there's a balance of both. The intellect, the emotion, you have to have really be coming from both angles in order to have a healthy relationship with anything. Just because something's true doesn't mean that everybody's going to follow it, at least in my generation, right? And there was a time when there was something called integrity and truth. I hear once upon a time. But I'll tell you like this, and I actually, just to quickly jump into a plain story, so just to give the idea, I actually asked this question to a Christian pastor of 40 years. I was sitting on a plane. It's a long story of how I got into it, which I'd love to share, but you don't want to hear now. But I know some of you do though. But anyway, here's I got you. Here's the main point of the story. I said to this Christian pastor, he was holding a book that says the Jews in Israel or something. So I said, "Oh, are you Jewish?" He said, "No, he's a retired pastor." I said, "Oh my goodness, can I ask you a question?" And this is the question. How do we know there's a God? How do we know we're right? How do you know the Christianity? How do you know Judaism? I know anything, etc. So again, I'm going to save you the details, spare you the details, even though it's worth it. The Ikar Nakuda that I asked him was the following question of where does it all come? What's the starting point of everything? You have your storyline of Christianity. I have my storyline of Judaism. So the main point is, what is the beginning part of where does everything start from? So I said, if I can ask you a question, I'm going to ask you please not to beat around the bush, if that's okay. And he said to me, okay. And I don't know if we're out there.
The regular bush.
The regular bush. So I said, and I'm going to say, like, for those who are a little bit up on your Jewish literature, let's call it, right? So then you might know Isaiah chapter 51 and Jeremiah chapter 31 and 35 or whatever, and Ecclesiastes chapter 7 and whatnot. I said, do me a favor, Pastor. Just don't pull that move where you start pulling out verses and don't address my question. And my question is as follows. You agree with me on one thing. Is it correct that pretty much even you agree that there's something called Sinai revelation? And this is essentially where the beginning of Judaism is. All of Judaism starts, Judaism, meaning not to say that there was no such thing as the Hebrews and there was the Abraham and there was etc., but the actual thing called where we become the Jewish people, which is when the culmination was about Sinai. We had a revelation, or so we claim. The storyline is that God came and he spoke to the entire Jewish people. The quick and easy answer, which is not going to be satisfying because nothing quick and easy is satisfying. All of this needs a lot more. And as Yossi will tell you, you can get the whole class on it another time. But the quick and easy is to understand that the entire Jewish people together experienced God speaking with them and saying the words, "I am the Lord your God that took you out of Egypt. Do not have any other gods from before me." That is the storyline we have. And then we have essentially what's known as tradition. We have tradition passing down from then until now. So that's essentially, how do I know there's a God? The way that I know there's a God is the way I know any history. How do you know any history? The basics of all history is that you have a certain amount of eyewitness testimony that makes a claim. I can't tell you what the cutoff number is, if it's 10 people, 50, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, but I think we could all agree when you hit a certain number that it starts to open up to another level of this is probably true. Our storyline is some around 3 million people experiencing God firsthand. So I asked him, this is the question I asked. So fine, so again, forgive me, I went off as speakers do, but I'm trying to stay focused. It's ADD, forgive me. But at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to. I said, how do I know? I know because of Masorah, because of the tradition passed down from my father's fathers, 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 mothers, mothers, fathers, fathers, grandfather's uncle. Now, you'll say, but Christianity is the same thing. And that's where the question comes in. And I said like this. I said, your storyline is that God basically changed his mind. That's your storyline. Now tell me, if God appeared to 3 million people and he wanted to change his mind, wouldn't it make sense to do that again in such a big gathering? Why is it happened to only one person or a few people? The guy stuttered a little, pulled out an Isaiah, pulled out a Jeremiah, then he stopped and he said, you know what? It's a good question. I said, thank you. My email is ravgav@gmail.com. I am awaiting your response. And just last night, nothing happened. He hasn't responded. And it's been about 2.5 years. So again, the quick and easy is Masorah tradition. And that's passed down. We have eyewitness testimony of so many people experiencing something and passing that down. That, my friends, is important.
And then, Gav, what you're mentioning is really the bite size of what's called National Revelation, which is a class that you've given, Rabbi Orlovsky has given for, I don't know, 30 years or so. So you can look that up. You can look it up on Project Inspire's site as well. The Discovery National Revelation. So again, Rabbi Feldman, we'll go to you, and then I want to segue into the questions that begin actually this session, is the bite-sized answer, so to speak, of do we have a right to walk around with this feeling that Torah is true, that God exists, etc.
Right. All right. It's good to go last. I get to hear what everybody else says. And I want to just tie together all the things because, there is, Rabbi Orlovsky spoke about that, the intellectual, you have to pursue truth. And there's other people who just like a nice Shabbos. I'd like to make shalom between those two guys. They both deserve to have a place. Rabbi Orlovsky's argument is very compelling. And then we sort of look at the guy who just likes Shabbos and Kugel as something wrong with him. And is his Jewishness lacking because he didn't come to it out of some deep, so what's the justification for these people? Okay, there's a lot to do. You're asking a lot of questions also. Let me get to the chase. Actually, I'm going to say one thing first. There's no colleges now. There's no classes. All I'm doing is Zooms, and what I have had a lot of time. I've been spending probably the vast majority of my time doing one-on-one conversations, marathon conversations with atheists, religious people who think they've become atheists. That's, there's not that many, but there are, and normally I don't have time for these people because I'm going to a school. I'm going to talk to 50 people, 100 people, or one guy. The class I can do in college takes an hour. This guy takes 14 hours. So I literally every day I'm doing this stuff, and I'd love to do the 14-hour thing for you guys. But here's what I'll say. What I tell the guy normally is, first of all, you're the luckiest guy in the world because you've developed problems with your high school, elementary school God. And now you feel adrift without anything. That's lucky because now you get to hear who God really is. And you're going to fall in love with God in a way you never were able to fall in love with God when you were in elementary school. There's a God that we learn as children before our brains actually kick in. And then we don't ask these questions, or we ask these questions in a 1-hour panel where we get to talk for 5 minutes about it. That's not fair. We have postgraduate degrees in physics. We deserve at least equal time for God. Or if you don't give equal time, then don't assume that you can ask questions about it. You're not qualified. So that's the first. I tell you, it's very exciting and it's a great question to ask. But if you're brave enough to ask the question, then be brave enough to sit down and hear real compelling answers, not short sound bites. As far as short sound bites go, because that's what today is about, let me make the most important point in the dialogue, is that in the 10 Commandments, there is no mitzvah, no commandment to believe in God. There's a lot of thou shalt and thou shalt nots in the 10 Commandments. The first commandment is, I am the Lord your God. That's not a commandment. It's just a statement of fact. How come there's no command to believe in God? I'm the Lord your God. You understand there's no command. That's clear? I also make sure because it's for many people, it's a paradigm shift. I never heard that. It's I am the Lord your God is not a command. It's a statement. I'm God. Why do we say that? And the real answer is that everyone believes in God. There is no such thing as a disbelief in God. The reason people think they don't believe in God is because they don't know what the claim is. I think that God is something ridiculous, and therefore I don't believe in him. I'll tell you in 1 second now who God is, and then you'll see why I say that everyone believes in him and why you don't have to prove it. And Judaism begins after that point. I am the Lord your God is a prerequisite to Judaism. The Kabbalists refer to the 10 commandments as the sun and the 9 planets. The planets rotate around the sun, but there's the sun, and the sun is given, and all of our life is rotating around that. So I want to show how I'm Lord your God as a sun, how it's obvious as the sun and clear as the sun. Short little way to understand it. Everyone in the world spends their entire life doing exactly the same thing. The painter sits in front of a canvas with a palette of colors on his arm, and he takes the colors and he's tending to create a symphony of color. The musician does the same thing. The only difference is his palette, instead of being colors, it's notes. And he's attempting to combine all his notes into one harmonized whole. The chef is doing the same thing with his life. Instead of having a palette of colors or a palette of notes, he has a palette of ingredients. And the perfume maker does it with sense. Everyone is attempting to combine their individual components into one whole. And shadchanim, people in relationships, are doing this with relationships, and thinkers are doing it with facts and phenomena. The entire world is attempting to create a harmonized oneness. When they're successful, they feel joy. When they fail, they feel sad. Oneness is the pursuit of mankind, because oneness is meaning and pleasure. Oneness is truth. Science isn't the opposite of Judaism or religion. Science is the pursuit of a unified field theory. Science is the pursuit of oneness. The entire world is worshiping oneness. From the moment we're born till the moment we die, all we want is oneness. That's the Jewish belief in God. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. God is one. Not that there's one God. There's one God means there's one God, not two. Our claim is that God is one. He is oneness itself. So when we ask, how can we prove God? What do I have to prove? I have to prove that oneness exists, because that's our claim. So my claim is Hashem Echad, there is oneness. God is oneness. Your question now is, how can we prove that there's God? Can we prove there's oneness? And I'm saying that everyone believes, everyone's a religious fanatic about oneness. We don't do anything in our lives that's not pursuing oneness. From the moment we're born to the moment we die, we're looking for beauty and truth and meaning and justice and music and art and hugs. It's all different intellectual oneness, emotional oneness, painting, music, art, love. We're all religious fanatics. What happens is that religion begins afterwards. So now what is the best way to have oneness? You know, if I break the oneness with one relationship, I could betray them with somebody else. Now I have oneness here, I break that. So how do you have maximum oneness? Do I spend time with my family, with my wife, with my community, with my children? Do I do intellectual oneness and read books, or emotional oneness? This is the story. So bottom line is that's my claim. We're all worshiping God. When someone likes the Shabbos meal, what they're saying is that this is the best delivery system for the oneness I always believe in. He's not intellectual. He knows the truth. He says, wow, finally I found something that makes what I know in my mind to be true in my life. That's the beauty of Shabbos, the intellectual and the experiential and the emotional. We all one. We all want oneness. Okay.
Amazing. Okay, so that was really the intellectual answer. You know, we got to the cholent. We got back around to the cholent. But I'm going to segue this into the next question, which is really, it happens to be a good segue. And again, I did you guys a favor. I sort of combined the questions into categories. So I'm going to ask 3 questions now that came in, which are broad questions. I'm going to start with you, Gav. I'll give you a shot at it first. Here we go. Even if God exists and Torah is true, told you it was a good segue, who cares? What does that mean to me? Second, what is the purpose of life and how do you know? And 3, why do I need God and religion in my life? There seem to be many other ways to make life fulfilling. So segueing from does God exist and is Torah true, is that how is that supposed to make my life a fulfilling life, and why is that the ultimate? Seemingly there are other ways to be able to make it fulfilling. God.
What was number two again?
Number 2 was, what is the purpose of life and how do you know? It means people tell you, now you're fulfilling your purpose in life. Like, really?
Okay.
How do we know?
Okay, very good. All right, so we have 3 questions. I'm going to repeat them just to make sure I get them, and then we're going to segue into one answer, hopefully. First one is, so fine, there's a God who cares. Number 2, purpose and meaning in life. And number 3, hit it. What was number 3?
Number 3, why do I need God and religion in my life? There seem to be many other ways to make life fulfilling.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I was sitting in Aish Torah a bunch of years ago, and this guy came out of a class, and he was extremely, extremely upset. So I said, what are you upset about? What's the problem? And he said to me the following line, and I thought it was brilliant. And it may have been Rabbi Glazer, Rabbi Yom Tov Glazer, who said the line, and I'm sure many people have heard it. This is just what had happened. So I said, what's wrong? He says to me, he says, can you believe, I can't believe the guy just said that. I said, what did he say? He said that a life without Rabbi Yossi, I don't know if you want to switch the spotlight. I don't know if you know how to, I think you're on spotlight now. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay.
No. You're good. You're good. I'm watching you. Don't worry.
He says that a life without God is a life without meaning. This is a statement that whoever the rabbi was, I believe Rabbi Glazer said, and this boy came out all upset. So I said, why does that upset you? Okay, now it's obvious why it upsets him. But he said, essentially what he spelled out was like, oh, you mean to tell me I don't have a life of meaning? Okay, so in other words, what you're telling me is you don't have a life with God. He said, yeah, I don't have God. Okay, so I said, well, let's just play this out for a minute. You understand, we have 2 options. Either there is a God or a power or a force or a starting point or something, an order, or there's chaos, random. So when somebody says a life without God is life without meaning, what essentially are they saying? What they're saying is that if there is order, then the order came from something. If you're going to say now that there's no God, then you're essentially saying everything is random. What is the meaning in random? The answer, and now I feel like getting a little too Feldheimy, too intellectual on this idea, but the Mike says the answer is very straightforward. There is no meaning in random. That's the definition of random. It's not purposeful. So it means to say, if you, so what are you insulted by? You're insulted by, okay, you're right. So what you're insulted by is the fact of, I wasn't sure if you're saying I'm not translating. All right, so what you're insulted by is to say to me that I don't believe in God, yet I have meaning in my life. You might have meaning, but that meaning is totally subjective to whatever you want it to be at the current moment. And as soon as you no longer feel that way, it's gone. It's not objective, and therefore meaning and purpose is meaningless. A life without God is a life without meaning. Okay, so that would be when you start to say, I went to number 3 because I believe that encompasses, we're going to come back. That's like, well, there's plenty of ways to be able to have connection, whatever. The answer is yes, there are plenty of ways. Right? Feldheim last time spoke about the fact, stay away from the rice. Of course, you can get a lot of joy in life. There's no question that a person can get joy in life. The question is, though, we're looking for the optimal. We're looking for the highest level. We're looking for as objective and real as we can get. So that would be the question of that. Now you say, well, who cares? What does it even matter if there is a God? Fine, you know what? Fine, so there is a God. So what does it even matter? What kind of question is that?
You're saying, what do you mean? Fine. There's only one objective view in terms of what a fulfilling life is, right? And now the question to that you're asking is, so what?
Well, yeah. But what I mean, I want to just reiterate that concept of what I mean. There's only one objective. I mean, say is that, like Rabbi Orlavsky said, either there is a God or there isn't a God, and if there isn't, then you have to make up your own meaning. That's the bottom line. In which case, there is no intrinsic meaning and there is no intrinsic purpose. Now, you might be fine with that, and that's your prerogative. You are welcome to live your life without any intrinsic or objective meaning and create the meaning of the week. And by the way, many people do, right? And that's some people live their life like that. And are they happy? The answer is sure, until they're not. And then they have to find a new thing, right? In which case, that's where we start to see not exactly that. Now we just quickly segue into the concept of, so what does it make a difference? Even if there is a God, the answer is very simple. That gives you the objective meaning and the direction. So now you say, so then what is the purpose? So what is the ultimate purpose? Once again, as we've mentioned, these are sound bites. There are entire classes in every single one of them. Be in touch with Project Inspire. They will guide you to every one of these longhand, probably with each one of us have our own classes on it. But here's the question. You say, what is the meaning? What is the purpose ultimately? The ultimate purpose of life. The ultimate, in one word in Hebrew, is called Dveikus. Dveikus literally translates as connecting or cleaving, being glued, connected to in the highest of levels, which brings about the greatest pleasure that a person can ever imagine. When we connect to that, like Rabbi Feldman was saying, to that symphony, and when we connect to that unity, and we connect to that oneness, then we connect to meaning, purpose, and walk away with more pleasure than we ever could have imagined. And before you cut me off, one last thing. Every person in the world is looking for one thing. Every single person is looking for one thing, and that's money. So, sorry, wrong class. Every person is looking for one thing, and that is happiness. Everybody wants to feel happy and content and ultimate meaning. And that's what Judaism espouses to do, direct us towards that purposeful meaning. And when we get that, then we walk away with the greatest pleasure.
Excellent. Rabbi Feldheim, I think Rav Gav took a page out of your book, but now you're going to take a page out of his book, and we're going to keep this one short. Here's like just a little different twist to it. Is a young person walks up to you, a 20-year-old, you meet them all the time, right? Regardless of religious background, he grew up religious, he didn't grow up religious, regardless, and says to you, I know it's true. I've heard the proofs. Yeah. So what? What are you telling that guy?
Okay, I think we just said it. Listen, so what? What's the thing that we just proved? At least what I said is what we're proving is that there's a God. Is what we're proving, that there's a ultimate oneness. So you're asking is so what? What does oneness mean? I'll tell you what it means. Rav Gav just ended saying that everyone in the world wants the same stuff. It's the truest thing. Everyone has the same struggles. You read any book written by any culture, and you can get so involved in the wants and the dreams and the pains of any individual, no matter where they came from. We crave the same things. When we talk about religion, what we're talking about is, so all those things we want are all types of oneness. We want love. We want justice. We want things to be fair. We want wisdom. The best metaphor to answer your question is I used to use always a puzzle, that life is a puzzle, and put the pieces together. We want to see the beauty of but it's more than that. It's a Rubik's Cube. When you have a Rubik's Cube, it's a three-dimensional puzzle. If you do the green side, you can ruin the blue side, and then the orange side. There's love and friendship, and there's families and children, there's knowledge, and then there's business, and there's community. Every one of those is important, and we care about them. Music and art. Imagine us, and we write books. There are books, self-help books on how to raise your children, how to be a husband, how to be a good employee, how to understand physics, biology, chemistry. I have a book on everything. Each one of those is the thrill and the joy of a oneness. Dveikus, the experience of God, is total oneness. So what is that? That's where I can figure out how to do the green side of Rubik's Cube and not ruin the orange. Can I have a family and be part of the community? Can I be an emotional person and write poetry and also be intellectual? Can I dance and can I sing? Can I be a painter and a chef? Judaism, religion, at least what Judaism, a lot of religions about escaping life. Judaism is the religion that's saying is that we are going to give you a program where you can have what you're craving. You don't need us to tell you that you're craving oneness. Here's how you have it. So what? All you care about is love and oneness and truth, but you have no guide to do it. You're going to alienate people. You're going to spend time saving the world and forget your kids, or you're going to spend time with your kids and forget the world, or you're going to read books and have no emotional depth. Here is the system for you to experience all the joy, and it's not as independent phenomena. It's one thing called oneness, and that's the so what. Everyone understands if it really is that, there's nothing cooler. We're saying it's all joy simultaneously. That's the biggest so what there is. I don't have time now to tell you how it is, but I invite you. We'll make the Zoom for you. We'll show you how it does that. That's the study of Torah. It's a lifelong study.
I don't know if your whole answer was true, but the line of "we don't have time for it" that was true, by the way.
All right.
That was definitely
one second before you, I want to tell you that someone was asking that question of, well, who cares? sorry to repeat last week's discussion or last whatever time's discussion, but the kids are that's exactly the point. Usually a person is coming through some sort of they're in pain. They had a bad experience, you know. So
it doesn't have to be. And Rabbi Lasky, I want you to chime in on this if you don't mind, because it doesn't have to be, because some people don't have to ask the question, so what, in order to feel so what. That means I would agree with you that somebody who comes over to you and says, Judaism, so what? Maybe that person needs a psychiatrist, you know, and they're dealing with other issues. But people don't have to ask the question in order to wonder, so what? So,
can I just say one thing? I spent all that time. I just want to make sure that I get the last sentence in. Is that the so what, based on what we're saying, the so what means that you're misunderstanding who God is. It's impossible to ask so what on joy, on meaning, on happiness. People think that religion is the opposite of life, is giving up on life for a world to come. So then you say, so what? There's nothing here. And they're expecting us to say, no, world to come. But we're not saying that. We're saying that you're making a mistake. Your so what is based on a lie. Someone told you that religion has nothing to do with life. Religion, at least Judaism, is only about life. Okay.
Rabbi Orlovsky is sitting around a table, and suppose it's never happened to you before, I know. But suppose even a person who was brought up religious says to you, I go through the motions. I know all about it. I've heard all the classes, gone through 20 years of Torah study and whatnot. So what? Meaning, like, does it really have to make a difference to me?
So there's two points to the answer, I think. Point number one is, and I go back to where I came in for myself, and that is, if it's true, it's true. You understand how absurd the question is. There is a God who created us and everything in the world, and he tells you this is the ultimate pleasure and the greatest thing in the world, and we say, nah, I don't think so. I'd rather watch TV. I'm telling you that I have the greatest thing in the world. Yeah, I don't think so. Right? So that's just foolish. But the Mesilas Yesharim, translating to English as The Path of the Just by Reb Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. So he explains, God put us in this world for one reason, to get the greatest possible pleasure. God doesn't need anything from us. Don't worry. He's very secure. Wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror, sees nothing. He's fine. He doesn't need us to do mitzvahs, doesn't need us to pray. He's very high self-esteem, right? He created the world for us to get the greatest possible pleasure. The only thing is you have to figure out what that is, because the world is filled with pleasures and you can't have them all. So you have to look around. And he says the greatest one is going to be a spiritual pleasure, right? A pleasure that gets better and better and better, and this infinite pleasure being close to God, right? Okay. Then he says the following in the first chapter. He says, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you were just created for the physical pleasures of this world. And then he asks the question, so how come we're not having fun? I remember back in the 80s, there was a bumper sticker. Are we having fun yet? How come so few people are having fun? He says, life is filled with worries and with problems and with illnesses and sicknesses and pains and suffering. And at the end, you die. Now, I thought I was the only one to, think this up. There was a movie called City Slickers with Billy Crystal. He's talking to a third grade class. He says, enjoy this time of your life. It's the best part. Third grade. Teenager, you think you can do anything. Your 20s are a blur. Your 30s, you get married. You have a couple of kids. You say, what happened to my 20s? 40s, you start to lose your hair. You grow another chin. One of your old girlfriends from high school becomes a grandmother. The 50s, you can't go out anymore because the music's too loud. You'll have a minor operation. You'll call it a procedure, but it's an operation. The 60s, you have a major operation. The music's still too loud, but you can't hear it anyway. The 70s, you and the wife retire to Florida. You start having supper 4 o'clock in the afternoon, lunch 10 o'clock in the morning, breakfast the night before. Wandering around malls looking for the ultimate frozen yogurt. The 80s, you'll have a stroke. You'll be taken care of by a Jamaican woman that your wife can't stand and you call mama. Now, that's it. That's exactly what the Mesilas Yesharim is saying. That is life. So I'm speaking to a group of first-year collegiates. These guys know everything. You know that. It's like, who is it? Mark Twain. He said, when I was 17, I thought I knew so much more than my father. And when I became 21, I was surprised how much he learned in 4 years, right? So I'm talking to first-year collegiates. They know everything. So I figure I'm going to try and hit them with this idea, this concept. I say, listen, psychologists tell us most people are not happy. Life has more sadness and worries and difficulties and problems in life. So my question to you is, why don't you all just kill yourself? By the way, they took me off a suicide hotline. I don't know why. But anyway, so one girl says, it's not true. I'm happy. All the time? All the time. Okay. Gewaldig? Anybody else? Yeah. So this one guy says, it's true I'm unhappy most of the time, but the happy times carry me through. I said, so let me restate your position. Your life is a dark and dismal hell. And whenever the muck and mire of your life threatens to suck you underneath, you look for a happy moment to hold on to keep your head above the filth of your life. Is that about it? He says, well, I wouldn't put it that way. I said, but that's basically what you're saying. I said, but if you kill yourself, you don't have to keep coming with excuses while you're alive. So he sat down. I said, anybody else? No one said anything. I went on with the rest of my class and no participation. So I said to the person in charge of the group, I said, it was a pretty dead group, pardon the expression. And they said, what are you talking about? These are the collegiates. They fight with everybody. She said, I'm going to find out. And she comes back to me and she says, I asked a bunch of the people, said, why didn't you argue with him? And they said, because for the first time in my life, I had to confront the fact that I didn't have a good answer to the question, why don't I kill myself? So what do? So we take drugs. So we drink, so we watch TV and videos, and we lose ourselves. We hook ourselves up to the matrix. We live a make-believe life, and we never have to face reality. And so when you say to people, this is it? This is the best? Are we having fun yet? So whereas if I could teach you to have a spiritual experience that will lift you out of this world into this unbelievable light and pleasure, that's what Judaism is about. So if you missed that, you missed everything. You know, so you're going to your best friend's wedding, and instead you stop at one of those rest stops, have a cup of coffee, and they're having a Seinfeld, a festival, and you're sitting there watching all the old Seinfelds, and you miss your best friend's wedding. So one could argue you missed the best because you took the first thing that came along, and that's the answer. Most people don't live the life they want; they live the life that happens. And they take this and they take this, and I happen to get married, I happen to live here, I happen. And then people turn around when they're 60 and they say, I wish I could live my life over. Why? Because I never thought what the best thing is I could get. I just took the next thing. And I went from thing to thing to thing, and I ended up someplace. I don't know if this is where I want to be, but this is where I ended up.
I don't know if they're going to be sitting next to you for much longer.
Listen, I've spoken to secular businessmen, and I said, if I can show you how to find this spiritual pleasure that lifts you out of this world and fills you with this unbelievable pleasure, they all say that would be the greatest thing in the world. I was sitting on a plane next to an Israeli businessman in his 50s on his way to an ashram to meet his wife. They were studying Buddhism and meditation. And I said, why? He goes, because you reach a point in your life and you're tired of just the physical pleasures. You want some spirituality in your life. I said, did you ever consider Judaism? He says, what does Judaism have to do with spirituality? It's about doing mitzvos. Now you shake a lulav, now you eat a matzah, now you put a coin in the stock up box. And that's it. You go from mitzvah to mitzvah to mitzvah. No one taught us that a person can pray and lift yourself out of this world, that the Gemara says it used to take them after tefillah an entire hour to get back down to earth because they were in such a spiritual elevated plane. But nobody teaches us that. Is that spirituality? Meditation? Lift us out of this world? The reason people say, what for? Because nobody even knows what it is. No one's ever seen it. No one's ever been told that that's the goal. And that's why I have to tell you, when I used to teach in Discovery, this would happen to me a lot, or in fellowships, people would say to me, Rabbi, you're the biggest challenge to my secular lifestyle. And I said, why? He says, because I can do anything I want, and I know you're living this restrictive lifestyle, and I can't help but feel you're having more fun in life than I am. And I said, kills you, doesn't it? They said, yeah. I said, that's right. Torah is the party.
Amazing. Okay, I want to move on.
Don't believe me? Just spend 8 hours on the phone with Rabbi Feldman. See if that doesn't do it.
14. He said 14.
14. I'm sorry. I was going on the abridged, the introductory course.
14 is over 2 days. We need a 2 days.
I got it.
Save a block.
Yeah,
right.
you gotta eat. You gotta eat also. Okay, moving on. Here's an interesting question. It's very appropriate for the time that we're living in as well. Here comes 2 questions, and here they go. Jews have always been idealistic, at the forefront of every good cause. Today, Jews, particularly religious Jews, seem to be very tribal, only caring about their own kind. Shouldn't we care about the world and such hot topics like racial and social issues, climate change issues, social welfare, etc.? And number 2 to that is, don't we stand for tikkun olam, perfecting the world? Why the disconnect? Okay, why do we seem not to be rah-rah about all the great causes out there in the world today, but rather much more tribal, much more within the issues that are in our little circles? Rabbi Orlovsky.
I found my old history book from 6th grade, and there was a chapter on the light of Greek civilization. And I always thought that was so ironic, because the Greeks call themselves the light, and the sages refer to them as darkness. The choshech al pnei sahom, that's Yavan. Greece is considered darkness. And this was exactly the argument we had with the Greeks. Because the Greeks said the way you light up the world is by taking your idea, conquering everybody, and forcing it on themselves. And what we said is the way you win over is by creating the ideal society and letting the light shine out. That becomes the purpose. Real light is when you produce something that lights up everybody else. The Jews have been, like I say, through most of their history, pretty insular, and yet somehow we're always in the forefront of history. Everybody's looking to the Jews, right? There's an old expression in journalism, Jews are news. And Iran and Iraq were at war for 8 years. You never heard about it. One Palestinian kid gets arrested in the West Bank, and boom, it's headlines. So when you build a better mousetrap, when you live a better life, it challenges the existence of everybody else in the world, and they look and they say, I don't know what he has, but I want to try to get that. And so the best way to challenge the world, Stephen Covey in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People talks about your circle of influence. Because at the end of the day, the only person I really have any control over is myself. But the more I work on myself, the more I extend my circle of influence to more people. And that's how you start a movement. That's how you start to change the world. Avraham Avinu was one person, but because he had an idea and he lived that idea and lived that ideal, it spread across the world.
Rabbi Feldman, does it seem like Jews once upon a time were more out there, and today religious Jews, is our thought process of let's only care about what's in our small circle but not what's out there?
Listen, part of me is inclined just to leave Rabbi Orlovsky's thought alone. It's perfect. It's exactly the point. I actually give you the Torah deals with this specifically. In the famous story where Yaakov wants to bless Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And Yosef lines up his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, in front of Yaakov, who's now blind, and the older son's on the right and the younger son on the left. And Yaakov switches his hands. Sikeles Yodov. He switches his hands and he puts his right hand on the head of the younger son, his left hand on the head of the older son. And everyone's busy. Why did Joseph himself says, why are you doing that? It's the older one. The commentators, though, ask, whatever reason he wanted to switch, he has legitimate reasons, I'm sure, but why didn't he just ask the boys to move around, right? Well, why is he switching his hands and doing this weird thing? He's an old man. Let them cater to him. Switch the boys and then do it properly. And the answer is, I think the answer is that if you want to change somebody, you want to affect something, the only thing you can do is change yourself. Don't try and shift the world around to fit your program. You switch your hands. You work on yourself. You make yourself a better person. If the world is not hearing what we're saying loud enough, then there's some flaw in our message. If we were happy and we're smiling and we're glowing and we're living a certain life, then we will succeed. which brings me to what I have to add. What I have to add, again, not that he didn't say it, but he's making a different point. But it's not a fair question. It's like, somebody's putting out textbooks in a factory, and every college is using his textbooks, and then someone's going to condemn him for not going to school and teaching. Every message that's valuable out there is our stuff. We're the ones cranking out every beautiful message: justice and kindness and love and charity and education and family and loyalty. Where did this come from? It's us. So we're the factory cranking out the message. We're creating foot soldiers, people who are growth oriented, who are loving, who are inspired, are taking our message. If the researcher in college doing cancer research were to leave college and go and work in a field hospital, everyone would say, what a hero, what a kind guy. But it would be the biggest travesty. This guy could develop a cure for cancer. There are different roles. We are the messengers of these, of all that's beautiful to the world. And we have been successful, and we continue to be successful. Everyone out there fighting for justice is a nachas to us. They're fighting our cause and our mission. That's not to say that we're not actually doing chesed. We're all busy with chesed. If the world would take a fraction of the chesed, anyone who knows, if you want to have a kid, you call Bonei Olam. If you're sick in a hospital, you call Biker Cholim. If Lakewood has a book this thick of gemachs. You know what a gemach is? A gemach is a free loan fund. You want to borrow my lawnmower, you need another baby crib, you need chairs for your party, you need benchers, you need having guests, you need extra cots and beds with pillows and blankets. I resent whoever asked the question. Someone got to you, and you like the abused wife who starts to think it's her fault. Somebody beat up on the Jew who asked this question and made him feel insecure. We're the idealists. And there's one last point, which I'll just say in passing, because it needs to be said, is a lot of times the people making the noise, it's because they're not idealistic. There's no noise being made when you're picking someone up off the floor. When you're nursing someone back to health, there's no noise. The noise is the breaking the windows. The noise is lighting fires and lighting fireworks. That's what a noise is. Don't mix up those people with idealists. Idealists are silent. People idealistic are driven by love and compassion. The sound that they make is the coo, coo, coo on a little kid. Just help them to stop crying. It's a pat on the back for somebody. It doesn't make noise. Most people out there today who are passing for idealists, they couldn't care less about helping the poor. They want to knock the successful. They want to silence all that's beautiful in the world. That's this week's Torah portion. Don't make that mistake. Korach was not loving. He said everyone's equal, but his goal wasn't to pick up the poor. His goal was to knock down the successful, to wipe the smile off the face. That's the only place that we don't exist. That's the arena we're not operating in the shattering of dreams. We're here to rehabilitate dreams. We pat people on the back. That's a silent sound.
Rabbi Felder, you're saying for those who think the Jews once were idealistic and thinking about the world, and they're no longer today, needs to look closer at the Jewish or religious communities to see what real idealism is and what we're bringing to the world. Rav Gav, do you believe that?
I want to just point out two things that we were just discussing. Number one is the concept of I love that he's the abused wife. Anyway, so back to focus.
By the way, Rabbi Feldheim, Rav Gav is looking for a gemach for skis.
Yeah, if you could help me out a little bit here. But here's number one.
You send me some mountains, I'll send you some skis. Deal. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah. Listen, I'm living the life here in Yerushalayim. Can't you tell? Anyway, so here's point number one is when we say that we're not. Again, going back to the original question, they were not as idealistic as we once were, etc. I'm not sure what we're talking about altogether. I just don't know when were we idealistic that we're no longer idealistic? Who was that now isn't? I'm not sure what exactly that question is. I believe that you still have plenty. You got the Aguda in America. That's one of the biggest organizations that's pushing very big things in Congress and in getting to the president and pushing big agendas and going out and helping and doing tremendous things. You have secular Jews, you have religious Jews, you have different. So I'm not sure exactly. I mean, it sounds almost like the question is, there used to be a lot of secular Jews that were very idealistic, and now religious Jews aren't anymore. And I'm not sure exactly what it was.
Specifically speaking, is it would seem to many that religious Jews, or maybe even once you become a religious Jew, you only care about your little circle that you're dealing with and not the greater world. Aren't we supposed to be worried about Tikkun Olam?
Okay, it's a different question. I just want to point that out. It's a different question entirely, and that brings us to the second part of Tikkun Olam. In other words, it's not that we once were something and now we're no longer. It's that, unless you're saying, I was secular and I was marching on Washington, and now I'm religious and I'm sitting in a study hall. Right? Okay, that's...
No, but don't religious Jews believe that we have a responsibility to perfect the world and make it better?
Yeah, we absolutely believe that. We absolutely believe that. That's, I think, Rabbi Orlovsky and Rabbi Feldman are both saying the concept of inside out, not outside in. There's two words that I'm going to say this, it's not true, but bother me to no end, but it's not true. But Tikkun Olam, it kills me because when people use that phrase, the ones that are usually using it are not, first of all, it kills me because I grew up yeshivish Ashkenazis, so it's l'sakin, it's sakin olam. But anyway, the point is, it's not tikkun olam. It doesn't say anywhere tikkun olam. It says l'sakin or litakein olam. But they stop in the middle of the sentence. There's more words to that sentence. They take the words and then they use it to whatever agenda they want to use it for. The sentence is l'sakin olam or litakein olam b'malchut shakai, which means what we're trying to do is to bring God's name into the world. In other words, it's about building connection and relationship. Of course, we have to care. We don't leave somebody dying in the street, and we don't like turn the blind eye. But at the same time, let's understand something. And this is a huge paradigm shift. And for those who know how to read, it's a paradigm shift. And I want to share with you just a huge one when it comes to the idea of Judaism. Spirituality is king. Spirituality trumps. It trumps everything. And what that means is that one who connects on a spiritual level will change the entire physical existence. Going back to our first question about how do we know there's a God, we didn't really address how we know there's Torah, but I really did in one fell swoop by Maimon Har Sinai, by the Sinai revelation. When the Jewish people had revelation of Sinai, God gave us the Torah. And we know that the Torah teaches us what it is, the pillar and foundation of all existence. As the Zohar puts it, but even most people say the Zohar, forget me giving to yeshivas for a second, I just have to say this. People say the Zohar, it's also a Mishnah and Pirkei Avos that say this, but okay, forget it, it's fine. There is a teaching in the literature of ethics from Sinai that says beautifully that Chibi Yisera, God loves us so much that he gave us a gift. It's a Kli Chemda. And he told us this about this gift that he gave us called the Torah, with which he created the world. Everyone goes to the Zohar. It's actually a Mishnah, right? With which he created the world. God created the world with the Torah. One who spends their time studying, learning, and building on the concept of Torah, it has an immediate physical reaction in the world, an actual physical reaction. Now, you either buy that or you don't, or if you're Jewish, you buy it half price. But at the same time, understand this. Physical only exists as much as spiritual does. Without spirituality, you got nothing. So my point being what? That we should just get into that, just go and start studying Torah and don't do anything? The answer is, of course not. Because we know one of the pillars is chesed, like Rabbi Feldman mentioned, and we got books and books galore to fill how much kindness is done. But understand at the same time, don't confuse your particular agenda with Tikkun Olam. You may be doing a nice thing in your eyes, but ultimately it would bring back to what do we call reality. And as Jews, we understand that our reality is based off what the good book tells us. And that good book, which is the New York Times bestseller, and I'm sure that's the King James edition, but the good book known as the Bible or the Bible, some say, written by the Lord himself, has told us how we're supposed to live our lives. We don't turn a blind eye. We do what we can, and we push a lot. And there are organizations, Lord, that are helping Jews and non-Jews alike. but don't disregard the spiritual entity and don't miss the point of Tikkun Olam. You want to go out, you want to paint walls in Africa, that's really nice, but make sure you're also teaching Torah as you do it, because the purpose is to bring reality, and reality is connection with God.
Excellent.
Justin, can I add one thing? Who's good?
I'm going to add one thing. So
30 seconds. By the way, we went on an ACE trip and we painted walls in Africa with 50 ACE students in the school. Okay, but God mentioned Sakin Olam B'Malchus Shakai. In the kingdom of God, the word Shakai is really what we're saying. The word Shakai is a very weird name of God. It means he who told the world to stop. Shakai is a word that means the constricting trait of God. What does that mean? To fix the world with the trait of shakai, constriction. I'll tell you a 10-second story. A guy comes to me, goes, "What do I tell my wife? She's complaining I'm spending too much time learning Torah and too much time in shul davening." So I looked at the guy, I go, "Yeah, that really happened. Like never." He goes, "What do you mean? That's what's going on." I said, "No woman ever told her husband that he's praying and learning too much. What must be going on is she thinks you're a faker and you're trying to get out of the house. If she thought you were really learning and growing, there's no one who'd be a bigger encouragement, no one who'd be a bigger fan." Most people, the rule of helping the world is it's a small arena. A lot of people are taking care of big problems because they're running away from putting the mittens on their kids to go to school and the boots over their socks and preparing snacks. It's a lot easier to save the world than to save your small world. You want to fix the world? It starts with Malchus Shakai, the small kingdom he gave you. Don't save the world by taking care of what's nearest and dearest and hardest usually.
Great. Rabbi Relevsky, just closing remark.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on one point, and that is, what disturbs me so much about the underpinning of this question is the following. The most racial attacks in America this past year were anti-Semitic. Who was out there protesting? Who was out there saying Jewish lives matter? Throughout New York, where people were sitting there hitting people in the head, knocking them to the ground, there were no police. But when the mayor gets out and says, "I'm warning the Jewish community, I'm going to come down on you. I'm soldering closed your playgrounds." And everyone else can go out and demonstrate and complain because everybody else matters. I hate to say it. We have to take care of ourselves because nobody else will. The fact that we've been the most acts of discrimination, the most acts of attack, violent, otherwise, nobody cares. So unfortunately, if Jews seem a little parochial, it's because nobody else cares about us. And frankly, we're an endangered species. And we should get at least as much attention as the spotted owl to make sure that the Jewish people survive and thrive.
Blue and white lives matter. Very nice.
Okay. Okay.